I'm Diane Macedo. Today on ABC News Live. 1 day to go until the final votes of the midterms. The party's biggest names are fanning out across the battleground states, fighting for control of the Senate. We have the candidates' closing arguments, the path to victory for each party, and the impact Gen Z could have on this election. Days after laying off half of Twitter's workforce, Elon Musk is reportedly inviting some employees back. This as he takes first steps toward bringing in more cash for the social media giant. And who wants to be a billionaire? The historic Powerball jackpot reaching nearly $2 billion. So what are your chances of winning? We begin with the election just one day, final election night, just 1 day away. Both sides are bringing out their heavy hitters with control of Congress at stake. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest.
Just 1 day out from Election Day, President Biden making one of his final campaign stops in deep blue New York, a sign that Democrats are facing headwinds.
Get out the vote.
The president giving a last-minute boost to New York Governor Kathy Hochul, running in a now unexpectedly tight race against Congressman Lee Zeldin, in a state that hasn't elected a Republican governor in 2 decades.
Where what's going to happen the next couple years is going to have more to do with what this country looks like 20 years from now than anything else.
At stake this midterm's 36 governors' races and control of the House and Senate. The biggest names from both parties fanning out across the battleground states that will decide control of Congress.
This is the year we are going to take back the House. We are going to take back the Senate. We are going to take back America.
3 presidents, past and present, flooding Pennsylvania, holding dueling campaign rallies.
Fundamental rights are on the ballot. Truth and facts and logic and reason and basic decency are on the ballot. Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
The race between Republican TV Dr. Mehmet Oz and Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman is a dead heat. With just 24 hours to go, control of the Senate is a toss-up. The races in Georgia and Nevada are an even split, too. Diane, and get this, more than 41 million Americans have already cast their ballot. That early turnout higher than the last midterm election in 2018, Diane.
All right, Rachel Scott, thanks for that. And candidates in the key Georgia Senate race are making their final arguments ahead of Election Day. Senator Raphael Warnock is calling the race a moral struggle for the state's soul, while Herschel Walker spends Saturday back at the University of Georgia, where he first made a name for himself on the football field. ABC's Ike Ejiachi joins me live from Atlanta now for more on that. Ike, ABC's 538 forecast shows this is the closest Senate race in the country. So what are Warnock and Walker focusing on in this final day?
Well, Diane, both candidates spent time returning home. Raphael Warnock was holding a night rally in Savannah, Georgia, his hometown, speaking to voters who know him the most. Now, Warnock became emotional, talking about his upbringing and the reasons why he got into politics. But he was also fiery, charged up when speaking about his opponent, Herschel Walker, repeatedly saying that truth matters, character matters, and integrity matters, alluding to Herschel Walker's well-documented history of lying about his credentials. He also spent time talking about his work with Senator Ted Cruz on that infrastructure package linking Georgia to Texas, really trying his hardest to attract those independent and split-ticket voters. Now, on the other hand, Herschel Walker was in Athens, Georgia, more specifically the University of Georgia, where his Hall of Fame football career began. He had a pep rally where a lot of the time he was really speaking against Warnock himself, saying that this entire race isn't about his personal life, but rather his policies he feels aren't right for Georgians.
Georgia has seen historic turnout for early voting. As of Friday, more than 2 million voters had already cast their ballots. How significant is that?
It's very significant. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger announced over the weekend that over 2.5 million Georgians cast an in-person or absentee ballot. That's shattering the 2018 midterm totals, which were just about at 1.8 million, and coming very close to the early midterm, for the early votings for the 2020 presidential election. That one was 2.6 million. And get this, on Friday alone, over 231,000 Georgians cast an in-person early ballot. That right there is 6% higher than the final day of early voting for the 2020 presidential election. So Georgians, they got the message. They came out early and voted often, Diane.
All right, Ike Ajachi, we appreciate it. Thank you. Meanwhile, Nevada is one of the most competitive states, with the GOP looking to flip both the House and Senate. Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto is facing a challenge from Republican Adam Laxalt in a race the GOP considers one of its best opportunities to turn a blue Senate seat red. ABC's Janae Norman joins me live from Las Vegas with more on that. Janae, it's interesting. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto is leading on the issue of abortion, but it's already codified into law in Nevada. So what's the strategy there?
It is, Diane, but the strategy is thinking about what it could mean if her opponent, Republican Adam Laxalt, were to win, and what that can mean on the national level for abortion, even though it is codified here in law in Nevada. And some voters I spoke with actually talked about that. I talked with a woman who said that she is voting for Republicans because she wants to see on the national level politicians who reflect her conservative views. So that is one thing. And when you turn on the TV, you see those ads from really more so from Democrats really taking on that issue of abortion. There's one with the Senator Catherine Cortez Masto calling Adam Laxalt, saying that, you know, he referred to Roe v. Wade as a joke and celebrated when it was overturned this summer. But the thing is abortion isn't the top issue for most people, pushing them to get out and vote to the polls. It is the economy. It is inflation, Diane.
And it sounds like Republicans have the advantage there. Also, Janae, 2 of Nevada's 4 U.S. House races will be in the swing seat spotlight. How important are these races to control of the House?
Well, they could be incredibly important. And the challenge for these incumbent Democrats here in these congressional races is President Biden's low approval numbers, as well as the inflation rates that are pushing up the prices of gas and groceries, in addition to redistricting. So they're in the first district, parts of Las Vegas and Clark County. Democrats really sacrificed part of their stronghold there in hopes of making some gains in some rural nearby swing districts. And that's put Representative Dina Titus in the fight of her political life. She is in a virtual tie, a tough fight with opponent Mark Robertson. And then in District 3, Susie Lee, she's only about 2 to 3 points ahead of her opponent, April Becker. Abortion a major focus in that race. But again, gas and groceries, that's something that Nevadans are dealing with on a daily basis and is really pushing them to get out and vote, Diane.
All right, Janae Norman for us from Nevada. Janae, thank you. And our latest ABC News and Washington Post poll shows sharp divisions on individual issues. Voters trust Republicans more on issues like the economy, inflation, and crime, while they trust Democrats more on issues like threats to democracy and abortion. So let's bring in ABC News contributors, former Special Assistant to President Biden, Michael LaRosa, and former Republican Congressman Tom Graves of Georgia for more on all of this. Michael, I'll start with you. President Biden has been very focused on touting his economic policies in this home stretch. But voters still show in these polls over and over again that they trust Republicans more on the economy. Do you think this election will be viewed as a referendum on President Biden's economic policies?
I don't think that's what we're seeing, because if you look at the data, even if we were to look at polls, right, what we saw consistently over the entire last few months, the entire fall, is that voters seem to be separating their feelings from either the president's performance and Democratic candidates, which means that the Democratic candidates are actually outpolling President Biden in popularity. And the other part to that is that their negative numbers are much lower than their Republican counterparts. So just because you might care about the economy, that might be your #1 priority, that does not mean you're going to pull the lever for Dr. Oz.
All right. And Tom, our latest poll shows that voters trust Democrats more than Republicans on abortion. How concerned are you that the overturning of Roe versus Wade could drive more Democratic voters to the polls tomorrow?
Well, I think that issue in particular probably energizes both bases equally. And so I don't see it being a negative towards the Republicans at all. But what I've noticed personally, and I guess sort of building on what was just said previously, is that, you know, over the last couple of months, the Democrats have really missed the message. They've missed the opportunity to set the narrative for where the American people are at this moment. Instead, they chose a different narrative, and maybe it was what the party narrative wanted it to be and hoped it would be coming into Election Day, but it just really didn't match up with where the voters are and where their focuses are or where their concerns are right now.
Now, Michael, Republicans have hit Democrats hard on crime.
Yes.
How challenging is it for Democrats to overcome that issue?
Well, look, it was the Democrats who, I think, last month passed a $300 million bill to invest in police departments, which have less than 125 police officers. Now, luckily, it was pretty bipartisan, but that fell under Democratic leadership. That's Democrats investing in law enforcement. What surprises me about Democrats is that they have not identified Republicans with January 6th as much as I think they should, specifically on law enforcement. There is only one party's supporters we have seen beat the heck out of police officers on TV, 140 of them, and that was Republicans. That was Trump supporters. I don't see how they can get away with being the party of law and order.
Tom, President Biden and Democrats have said that democracy itself is on the ballot. Many Republican candidates have denied the results of the 2020 election. Some also haven't committed to accepting the results of these elections or have outright said that they won't concede if they lose. Do you think they'll follow through on that, and are you worried about that at all?
Well, if I were to look at this election cycle, I think the individuals probably most concerned about the outcomes of elections tomorrow would be the Democrats. There's probably more of them that are going to be upset with the outcomes rather than Republicans. And saying that, they do have the opportunity. If it's a tight election, the states allow for recounts. They allow for, various looking at different items that might have occurred throughout election and have them go through the court system. All those things are available. They're available to Democrats and they're available to Republicans as well. And everybody should have that opportunity. But given that, I think there's going to be more Democrats upset with the outcomes of tomorrow's elections than Republicans.
I would just say that if you look at what we've seen so far and people who are actually voting, that Democrats are ahead by 5 million votes going into tomorrow. Mathematically, it just gets tougher for Republicans. They have to dig themselves out, starting at a 5 million vote deficit tomorrow. If there's a red wave...
There are also nuances in early voting versus people going to the polls and party tendencies there.
There are, but if there's a red wave, we haven't seen it yet.
All right, Tom, Michael, thank you both. We appreciate it. And ABC News Live will, of course, have more election coverage throughout the day on Election Day and more coming up today as well. But right now, we're going to get to the importance of the Gen Z vote in these midterms, how the next generation of voters could help define our future right after this. Welcome back. With midterms just one day away, many campaigns are focusing on getting out the vote. Some candidates are even turning to TikTok to try to reach young voters. Alex Prochet has more.
TikTok has captured a younger generation's attention, and now some politicians are using the platform to tap into the youth vote this midterm election.
We need every single one of you, and every single vote is important.
You know why gas is costing so much money these days?
The young people are on social media, right? And so it's important to reach every voter, either online or offline.
Put some respect on my name. You already know what it is. Respect on my name.
Congresswoman Val Demings is running for Senate as a Democrat in Florida against Republican incumbent Senator Marco Rubio.
How good it feels to be back in the village.
She's been using TikTok to try to rally young voters across the Sunshine State.
You know, I have 4 granddaughters. My granddaughters, who are dancers, spend quite a bit of time on TikTok. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this dance, and let's see what happens. The response was unbelievable.
So you're a believer now?
I'm a believer.
Demings' videos have gotten more than 1.5 million likes. But could they actually inspire young Floridians to head to the polls?
I'll probably, watch it and then just skip it, and just move on.
Why just move on?
Honestly, it doesn't really seem like something I would interest to follow.
Would you be more motivated to go to the polls?
I think so, yeah. Just because it's they're actually making an effort to get in touch with the youth in still a tasteful way.
Our thanks to Alex Prochet for that report. And for the first time, members of Gen Z, like Maxwell Frost from Florida, Caroline Levitt from New Hampshire, they could become the first ever Gen Z representatives in the House. I want to bring in Sophie Barron, founder of CEO of The Conversationalist, a nonpartisan platform to encourage conversation among Gen Z. And Sophie, thank you for being here again. This is the first election where Gen Z is on the ballot, but young people historically don't show up that much to the polls. So what are you seeing in terms of the effort to get out the vote with Gen Z and whether or not it's working?
Diane, it's great to see you. If anything, I think the story of the election come tomorrow is going to be that there was a Gen Z wave. I know there's a myth that young people don't show up to vote, but overwhelmingly 40% of young people have already indicated that they will vote. And in comparison to generations past, young people are voting at higher levels than older generations did when they were our age. So if anything, I think because our future is at stake, our voices will be heard and young people will be seen at the polls.
So what are some of the top issues motivating Gen Z voters based on the conversations that you're having?
Abortion, protecting democracy, inflation, as well as gun violence are the top 4 issues on Gen Z's ballot. In the conversations I've been having at The Conversationalist, young people have also indicated mental health, student loan debt, immigration, and climate change as issues that they care about. And though young people may differ on their politics, we're seeing a lot of common ground when it comes to human rights. 72% of young people in America feel that the rights of others are under attack, and 59% feel that their own rights are under attack. And though that statistic may be glaring, it gives me a bit of hope that 3/4 of Gen Z acknowledges this, because in order to combat the hate-fueled violence we see, we have to name it first.
There's been so much conversation about divisiveness right now and how divided the American public feel. Do you get more hope when you talk to Gen Zers? Do you feel like there's more possibility for common ground there?
I absolutely do, because in order to uncover that common ground, we have to have a conversation first. So with the elections tomorrow, I think the best thing we can do between now and then is start a conversation. When you talk to someone within your existing social network or someone you have a relationship with, it can increase voter turnout by many. And for young people that may feel disenfranchised at this moment, I think it's important to note that we have the receipts. When we make our voices heard, we can actually see an impact be made. I'm from Kansas. We saw over the summer when abortion was up for a vote in our state, young people showed out in droves to make their voices heard, to vote no on that amendment to ensure access to abortion. And whether it be voting or in other ways, there are so many opportunities for young people to make their voices heard, and I think voting is the best place to start.
And what if they're watching this and just thinking, I'm just too busy and my vote doesn't really matter anyway?
I think that's a valid concern and is one that I hear in my conversations. But if anything, I think we have the proof. Our generation is a generation of pragmatic voters. We understand that it's a long game, but for us, we oftentimes value instant gratification. So I think it's important to acknowledge that our voice may not be heard in that very moment when you're casting your ballot, but think of it as a seed planted, because that's the future that we're building together.
All right, Sophie Barron, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
And I also want to bring in 538's Galen Druk now for more on the Gen Z voters out there. Galen, are there certain areas where Gen Z could make a bigger impact on these elections?
I think there are. So first off, I should say, I think there's a common conception that young people live in cities. And in popular media, that's oftentimes the case. But in recent polling, we see that 60% of young adults in America live 10 miles away from where they grew up or less. So lots of people don't move to the cities or the suburbs or what have you. A lot of people are living close to home. But some of the areas in the U.S. where we can see the biggest impact from the youth vote is around college campuses. And actually, some of the most competitive House districts this cycle are in those areas. So think North Carolina's 13th district around Raleigh, where you have the Research Triangle with Duke and other big public universities. Think places like Des Moines, Iowa, with Iowa's 3rd district. So around college campuses is definitely a place where youth can have a significant impact if they turn out to vote.
How critical of a demographic are young people compared to middle-aged voters or senior voters?
Great question. So I really enjoyed the enthusiasm of your last guest. The reality is that even though young voters had a record turnout in 2018, it was still only 36% of people aged 18 to 29 who turned out to vote. And that was a record high. They made up 13% of the electorate. Overall, Americans overall, 53% turned out to vote in 2018. And the age demographic that was the largest was 45 to 65, who made up 40% of the vote. So they are significant, and in particular, they are important for, if Democrats want to stem any losses, they really do have to hope that youth turnout is high. But when it comes to the overall electorate, they, of course, aren't making as big of an impact as older voters.
So, Galen, when you look at voter registrations for this age group, how much was that impacted by the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
in the immediate aftermath of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, we did see that there was an increase in voter registrations amongst women and young people in select states throughout the country. And I think the prime example, which your last guest talked about, was Kansas, where because there was the issue of abortion rights on the ballot over the summer, we did see a lot of sort of changes in the electorate getting ready to vote on that. And we saw that about 50% of new registrations amongst women were under the age of 25. So that is an example. Of course, the example of Kansas is not going to play out all across the country because literally abortion rights as they were on the ballot in Kansas are not on the ballot in other places in the US. But that is an example that when it sort of hits close to home, there is an increase in registration.
So, Galen, last day, what are you watching for?
Oh, boy. I mean, the Senate could not be closer of a race at this point. So I'm really going to be watching final sort of indications from Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, where it's truly on a knife's edge. We encourage folks not to pay too much attention to early vote data because, you know, there are going to be a lot of people who vote on Election Day. But Nevada is one place where early vote data has been pretty indicative. It looks good for Republicans so far.
All right, Galen Druk from 538. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And ABC News Live will have complete coverage of the 2022 midterms tomorrow starting at 7 a.m. Eastern and special election night coverage led by David Muir, Lindsay Davis, and the entire ABC News political team beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. Also, be sure to check out the groundbreaking political series Power Trip hosted by George Stephanopoulos, streaming now on Hulu. Coming up, days after laying off half of Twitter's workforce, Elon Musk is reportedly inviting some employees back. Well, we're learning about that. And do you want to be a billionaire? Your chances of winning tonight's historic $1.9 billion jackpot when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Days after laying off half of Twitter's workforce, Elon Musk is reportedly inviting some employees back, deeming them too essential to be let go. It comes as Musk is trying to bring in more cash for the company, announcing Twitter will start charging $8 a month for premium features, including the blue check mark to show your account is verified. 4.5 million people are without power in Ukraine after Russian strikes on the country's energy infrastructure. Most of the outages are in the capital of Kyiv. The mayor is warning residents ahead of winter to prepare for total blackouts and the loss of heat and water. And 19 people are dead after a passenger jet crashed into Lake Victoria in Tanzania. Officials say the Precision Air flight went down in bad weather as pilots were trying to land. And some people around the country, are lining up to get their Powerball ticket in hopes of becoming a billionaire. The jackpot has reached a historic $1.9 billion, but odds of winning are 1 in 300 million. Experts say you have a better chance of being struck by lightning and being bitten by a shark. But it's not zero. Not zero. I'm Diane Macedo. Do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis. And good luck.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.